Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the men and women of the Air Force Civil Engineer Center observe an Assumption of Leadership ceremony in which the reins of responsibility are assumed by Mr. Randy Brown. The presiding officer for today's ceremony is Major General Theresa C. Carter, Commander, Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center. I am Captain Tyler Johnson, and I'm honored to serve as your narrator for today's ceremony. I would like to begin with a brief review of this morning's ceremony. In just a few minutes, the official party will arrive, and I'll ask you to stand as Ruffles and Flourishes is played, followed by the playing of the national anthem and the invocation. As a reminder, military in uniform remain at attention during the national anthem, and it is appropriate for all others to place their right hand over their heart. Cues throughout the event will be provided as they unfold. And now it is time to begin today's ceremonies. There are a number of distinguished and special guests with us today. We ask that you please hold your applause until everyone has been introduced. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Brown's wife, Mrs. D. Brown. We'd also like to welcome Mr. and Mrs. Brown's son, Cameron, and their grandson, Evan. We're happy you could all be here to witness this special event. Now we would like to recognize and welcome Lieutenant General John Cooper, Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection, Headquarters, U.S. Air Force. Major General Timothy Green, Director of Civil Engineers, Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection, Headquarters, U.S. Air Force. Brigadier General Thomas Murphy, Vice Commander, 24th Air Force, and Deputy Commander, Air Force's Cyber, Joint Base San Antonio-Lackland. Dr. Marilyn Croach, Deputy Director of the Air Force Civil Engineer Center, Joint Base San Antonio-Lackland. Colonel Chris Bardry, Commander, Air Force Security Forces Center, Joint Base San Antonio-Lackland. Colonel Gregory Reese, Vice Commander, Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, Joint Base San Antonio-Lackland. Representing the Command Chief Master Sergeant, Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, Joint Base San Antonio-Lackland, Chief Master Sergeant David Fish. We welcome other senior leaders, directors, commanders, deputies, colleagues, friends, and co-workers who have taken time out of their busy schedule to join us for today's ceremony. Thank you for attending. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in a round of applause for all of our distinguished guests. The ceremony you will witness today is deeply rooted in military tradition and dates back to the reign of Frederick the Great of Prussia. During this period, military organizations developed flags with unique and specialized colors and designs. When soldiers followed their leaders into battle, they kept sight of their flag. If the banner still waved after the conflict, it was a sign of victory. Having this position of great importance, the flag was incorporated into ancient ceremonies where the organizational banner was exchanged in public for all to see that the holder of the flag is the unchallenged and sovereign leader. The modern-day ceremony is principally symbolic, yet it still announces to all the authority of their incoming leader. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the playing of Ruffles and Flourishes and the playing of our national anthem by the U.S. Air Force Band of the West Clarinet Quartet, The Mission Winds. gentlemen, please remain standing for the invocation provided by Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Randy Irwin.
I invite you to join me as we pray today. Gracious God, we are grateful for your presence among us today, for the blessings of this day, for a country founded on liberty, for the voice we have in its government, for people who would defend it with their life. We thank you for each person standing with us today and the sacrifices that they make day in and day out to make our country strong. Our attention now is focused on Mr. Randy Brown. Lord, you have brought him to this place, and it is no accident that he is here today. We thank you for his service and his leadership, and we ask that you would grant him favor in this transition to lead the Air Force Civil Engineering Center. Give insight for the upcoming challenges and bless him with strength and endurance in obtaining and leading others to success. Please watch over his family as he leads. We thank you for his dear wife, Dee, and we thank you for the strength and the support that she provides. Be with us all that we may stand with honor, that we may serve with distinction, that we may choose what is right and what is good as the course heading for our life. And one last thing, Lord, we pray that you would just be with all of our warriors around the globe, especially those in harm's way. Be with their loved ones, and we certainly pray for a safe return. And I submit these things to you and to your care. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Thank you, Chaplain Irwin. Today you will witness a celebration of both continuity and change. Continuity in the form of a military tradition whose American roots reach back through time when the Continental Army of the United States conducted the first official ceremony in America with the passing of organizational flags. Change, because we now have a single center to support civil engineers around the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to introduce the Commander, Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, Major General Theresa Carter.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and first, thanks very much for being here. A couple of shout-outs at the beginning. Thanks, as always, to the Band of the West. Great job. It's always great to have live musicians, and based on my time here at JBSA, I know you are an incredibly talented group, so thanks for adding your efforts to the ceremony today. Chaplain, awesome words, well done, and glad to have you on the team as well. And certainly to everybody that's here in the audience, and as much as I like to talk with my hands, they said you have to use the mic because we are recording this event for the rest of the AFCEC team that can't be here in person. So I'll do my best to keep the hand gestures down to a minimum. But General Cooper, General Breen, thank you so much for being here. This is a big day. And again, it's nice to have senior leaders here to, one, reinforce the support that they provide, but also recognize that we're supporting your requirements as well. And Dr. Croach and the rest of the AFCEC team, thanks for being here. To Randy's family, it's awesome that you can be here and start to experience some of the Texas hospitality that San Antonio is known for. And when they say Military City USA, it extends to the extended military presence. So Randy's as much an airman that the team will support here as the rest of us. And I think you're going to have a great time here, so welcome. So as I thought about how to craft comments today, unfortunately we weren't able to do a change of leadership ceremony where Mr. Shabika would be up here and we'd have an opportunity to talk about many of the things that happened with the AFCEC team under his tenure. It's just a matter of timing. And so I wanted to make sure we touched on some of the things that this team has accomplished over the last 3 years. Talk about why Randy is the right guy to take the mantle at this time, and then where I see the organization going in the future. So many CE squadrons, and of course Red Horse, their motto is can do, will do, have done. So I'll begin at the end and talk about what have you done as an AFCEC team since senior leaders about 5.5 years ago said, you know what, we're going to take the Air Force Real Property Agency, the Air Force Civil Engineer Support Agency and the Air Force Center for Engineering and the Environment, and we're going to merge them all into one. I know some of you in the audience probably said, no way, that will never work, what are they thinking? And probably had a lot of doubts, boy, can we really pull this off? This is big, but you did it. You made it happen. And for those Survivor fans out there, it's like they got to emerge, drop your buffs, you're all now one color. Well, that's a little bit harder to do in practice because those three organizations really grew up with different cultures, different ways of executing the work that the Air Force has asked you to do. If you were from the Real Property Agency, many of the things you did were measured in terms of years and even decades as we're trying to close out and turn over former installations back to their local communities and helping with the myriad of things that are very enduring and long in duration. If you were AFCEC, you were kind of mixed. You had some of those very long enduring type of activities, but you also had things where there was a customer at the end of the phone at an installation that needed your help right here, right now. And AFCEC was more of that style, really supporting our operations flights, our readiness flights. Hey, somebody called, we'll haul, we'll go make it happen. And so how do you take those three very distinct and different and proud organizations and create a new identity? That is not easy. But that's what Mr. Shabika got handed. And again, I would say he was the right person at that time. 1 + 1 + 1, all of us engineers know, well, that should equal 3. Well, probably October of 2012, 1 + 1 + 1 was maybe a little bit less than that, because you had to think about how do you take three different ways of doing business, combine it into one. So you probably weren't as efficient right out the gate. But again, when I looked back and really thought about what you have been able to do, you proved all those people wrong. You said, you can't do it because you're making it work. And so what did you do just in the last couple of years? The new part of AFCEC, the P&I Directorate, I think it really demonstrates the opportunity that the senior leaders who thought this was a good idea, why they thought that. And it's really an ability to look across our entire Air Force and come up with different ways of doing business. They've been able to come up with ways to effectively oversee and use asset management principles, a $1.4 billion program. And because over the course of the last couple of years, you've figured out a way to rack and stack and prioritize requirements in a way that's visible and transparent to the installations, last year you executed the largest end-of-year closeout in those organizations' history. And what does that mean if you're at the installation? It means you have more capability and capacity to get the mission done. That's huge. The Facility Engineer Director last year awarded 29 MILCON projects worth almost $500 million and 6 projects against other non-President's budget programs. You supported and are supporting some major weapon system bed downs, KC-46, F-35. All in all, you're doing a fantastic job at some very large portfolios. The Installations Directorate, I talked about BRAC. They're at a 96% transfer rate now for former BRAC properties back to the local community, which is a huge deal. They're also working our housing privatization portfolio. The energy folks have privatized 66 systems and contracts at $5 billion, cost avoidance of $500 million. Operations, there isn't anything at a base that you don't touch. Working to tackle some aircraft hangar system issues, and also with the pavement evaluation team, really getting out and about and supporting our installations, both in garrison and in a deployed setting. And then the Environmental Directorate, you're really getting a lot of bang for the buck, managing over 3,000 projects, took effort to combine almost 200 contracts at 43 bases into just 25 contracts, saving $30 million over 5 years. That's real value that this organization is adding back to the Air Force to either reinvest in installations or apply to other priority combat requirements. So I think you can be very proud of where the organization is as you welcome in Mr. Randy Brown as your new leader. So now 1 + 1 + 1 is probably about 3.5 getting close to 4, because we're starting to see the benefit of putting everybody together. So why is Randy the right guy to come in at this time behind Joe Shabika? Well, I think, again, focusing on what the organization can do and has the potential to do, you'll see why his resume is a good fit. He's got a very diverse background. He started out spending 4 years as an enlisted airman in the Air Force, so he understands what it's like to serve and what it means to wear the uniform. He also worked in private industry for a few years, so for the contract partners that we have in the audience, he understands that perspective and has had a chance to see it on the other side of a negotiating table. And then finally, he is very steeped in experience as a member of the Air Force civilian workforce. Program management is his forte, but a couple of times in his career, the Air Force asked him to step outside his comfort zone. In 1992, he went to Saudi Arabia and worked the Foreign Military Sales Program. Now, that's not an easy thing to do, particularly when you come home and tell your family, guess what, we're going to Saudi Arabia. But it was an opportunity to learn and appreciate the value of diversity, understand different cultures, and really understand the importance of partnerships and relationships to getting work done. He's also had a chance to lead some very big and complex organizations. And it's a lot different if you are the person in charge of the organization versus maybe being a deputy or a director. If you are the civilian leader or the commander, you feel the weight of responsibility on your shoulders. You're the individual senior leader charged with making decisions, and he's had that experience. So I'm incredibly confident that both his time on the staff at AFMC as well as his time leading a big directorate down at Eglin, that he's got the leadership, he's got the technical expertise and background to step in and continue the momentum that Mr. Shabika started as this organization came together. And Randy, the Air Force is going to ask you to do quite a bit. AFCEC is now that organization that folks like General Green, General Cooper are going to look to help deliver some critical needs in the civil engineering community. Help us ensure that our airmen are trained and ready and equipped when we ask them to deploy and go into harm's way. Make sure that the services we're providing in support of our installations, what we call combat platforms, they're really the basis from which we conduct global reach, global vigilance, and global power. AFCEC plays a huge role in that, in making that happen. But we also need, certainly at this point in time and going forward in the future, we need our installations to be agile. If you've read the Air Force strategy and many of the things our Chief and Secretary are saying, agility is the key to success. So how does AFCEC ensure that our installations are resilient and they're agile for both what we need today as well as going into the future? And then finally, how do we be innovative? How do we continue to look for different ways of solving very complex problems? Some of the accomplishments I listed earlier, you can see that folks are looking for new solutions, new ideas, and they're generating cost avoidance and cost savings. And that's a huge bonus for the Air Force. So Randy, the job is significant, the challenge is significant, but I know that you're going to be able to continue the great work that this team has done, working with MAJCOMs, building partnerships, working with the construction agents, the different EPA regions, and really keeping the momentum going. I think the work that the team has started, you'll continue with refining our centralized management processes, applying those asset management principles, and really trying to target those scarce resources against the most pressing and highest priority needs for the Air Force. So with you coming on board, Randy, I can see that we're quickly going to get 1 + 1 + 1 exceeding 4, marching towards maybe 5. But what is the future going to bring? AFCEC is now part of a different team, the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center. And as I think about what that marriage or that merger is between AFCEC, the Security Forces Center, and all the disparate elements that we brought together to form this team, we have an exciting opportunity in front of us to think differently about how we deliver support, how we support commanders in the field, to not let organizational boundaries or wiring diagrams inhibit our thinking in terms of how we leverage resources. The bottom line to the commander or the airman at the base who has a need, they don't care how we get it to them. They just want it where they need it, when and when, quality and quantity required to get their job done. And the other thing I see in the future, again, on what we will do together, is figuring out how to adopt a networked approach. Because when you see the power that's resident in the different facets of this enterprise, it's pretty inspiring and amazing at what we have the opportunity to do. So how can we work together and make sure that we're working in unison to meet needs at the base? So there's a Ethiopian proverb that says, when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. And that's really what I think the IMSC has an opportunity to do together with AFCEC. AFCEC, working with every other part of the organization, when we work in unison, there isn't a problem we can't tackle or a problem that we can't solve. And together, that is what's going to help the Air Force move forward. Because it really doesn't matter how you're organized, what you're called, where you fit in the hierarchy. What matters is the value, the passion, the attitude, and the performance that we bring to the nation every day. Because in the end, it's about the nation. It's about that U.S. on my lapel, not whatever organizational patch or functional badge we may wear. It's providing that combat capability to keep our Air Force the best in the world and to keep our nation the great nation that it is. So I'm very positive and hopeful and confident that at whatever point in the future Randy passes the mantle of leadership for AFCEC to somebody else, that by that time 1 + 1 + 1 probably going to equal 6, and you're going to have it on a glide path for an even brighter future. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the team. I'm incredibly excited to continue working with you since you were part of the AFMC team previously. And again, welcome to you and your family. I think you're going to have a great time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Major General Carter. Mr. Brown, would you please join Major General Carter in front?
Publish the order.
Attention to orders. Under the provisions of Air Force Instruction 51-604, Major General Theresa C. Carter, Commander, Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, appoints Mr. Randy E. Brown as civilian leader of the Air Force Civil Engineer Center, effective 16 July 2015. Thank you, Major General Carter. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Director, Air Force Civil Engineer Center, Mr. Randy Brown.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. Thank you, General Carter, General Cooper, General Green, for being here. I've worked with General Cooper in the past in other capacities, so it's great to be working with you again, General Green. I've just gotten to know, and I'm looking forward to working with others too. General Carter, we've known each other for a while now, and like you said, worked together from a headquarters perspective as IMSC has come together. So I look forward to working with you in a totally different capacity. So I have a few things I want to say before I do. I do want to recognize my family. You see them sitting down in front here, but I'm going to give them a couple of things. You know, this is the first time in this room, it was really high. I feel like I'm back in grade school or something. So we were talking today, how do we lower the stage or raise the floor, one or the other? So I'm going to come down for just a second and do a few things. One of the few things I want to do was at least recognize my wife with some flowers, and thank you, Gay, for doing this. And I have these cool coins here, so I'm going to give my grandson one. Thank you, buddy. you talked about hospitality, and you certainly felt it already. And we look forward to feeling more. I was thinking back, my wife had told me that she had some ties back to Kelly, back when Kelly was still in installation, and that her mom and dad were married here. Her dad was a B-17 crew member, and so they had met before the war, and then yes, I think many couples did at that time got married before he went overseas to actually engage in the war. And so, fortunately, he was able to survive. You know, being a crew member of a B-17 over Europe, it wasn't exactly something that you had a long life expectancy for, but he managed to make it all the way through and come back and here. And then we were visiting with some family on the way down here. I'm from Kansas, so we kind of took the long way to Texas through Kansas to get here. And my aunt, Lois, I'll talk a little about her more in a minute. Her husband, my uncle, my dad's brother, was in the Pacific during World War II, and she was saying that how appreciative she was that her husband, Uncle Norval, was wounded in Japan. Actually, after the peace treaty was signed, he was there as part of the peacekeeping force in Japan and was wounded there, and he came back to Fort St. Houston, and she said the military flew her into Randolph, and how the Randolph Airmen made sure that she got from Randolph Air Force Base to St. Houston and could get caught up with her husband, who she hadn't seen again for many, many months because he had shipped out. Again, they had gotten married before he shipped out to the Pacific, and hadn't seen him until he came back and he was here at the medical center there. So ties here, and then my tie, I'll get on with other remarks here in a minute, but you know, if we were going to do this when Joe retired, I was doing the math. I thought, well, you know, June 26th, that sounds a real familiar date, and I started doing the math, which I shouldn't have done because it became depressing very quickly. Because I realized that if we had managed to do this on the 26th of June, like we were originally intended to do, that would have been exactly 42 years to the day that I arrived at Lackland Air Force Base to start my basic training. I remember that because it was a Friday afternoon, evening by the time I got here. I inducted through Denver, was the center I came in through, and by the time they got us on a flight and got us down there, it was evening. I just remember that the biggest takeaway I had from basic training was to tell everybody never show up at basic training on a Friday night, because you don't get your clothes and haircut till Monday. So you're here in July, marching in clothes you came off the plane in, which are probably the clothes you showed in Denver the day before, because you brought nothing with you. And you get to march in them all weekend, and you stand out like a sore thumb. And I remember everywhere we went, the chant of rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. And you couldn't wait for Monday morning to come around so you could get your green fatigues, your combat boots, and your haircut, and look like everybody else. At that point, sticking out wasn't exactly what you wanted to do. Let me just say a few things, and then we'll wrap it up and get on to more fun things like having some cake and other things, and just have a chance to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit today about champions. Before I get into that, I just again want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank you for taking time out. I want to thank the front office for putting this together, and they did such an outstanding job. We've talked about 3 family members that come here. I just want to recognize Cameron's made it to every single one of these things that I've been involved with. My wife has made it to Cameron's made it to all but one. He couldn't make it to the last time when we went back up to Dayton. But Evans, my little buddy, you'll hear me talk about Evan a lot. He's my little buddy. He's made it to all of them. So I think from the time he was 2 on, he's made it to every ceremony down doing something like here. So we had to get him down here. That wasn't a hard thing to do because he wanted to come. We just had to convince his parents that it was a good thing for him to come down here. So he's here. He's ready to move. The hard part may be getting back in Ohio. So we thank you so much for what you've done when we've come down to our house having visits and other things. You've just been outstanding. So we really look forward to working with you. Let's talk a little bit about champions. Now, this isn't an original idea. I like to listen to TED Talks. And I have the TED podcast. We watch it on TV. Whole family sit around and talk about it. And so, if you've not listened to them, I find them entertaining. If you do the podcast, you get about an hour's length. If you do the video on YouTube or if you have the TED channel you can get to on one of your wireless devices, you'll get maybe a 10 or 15 minute discussion. That's wide ranging and everything. But I was actually out mowing the yard, had my headphones on, and heard this discussion about champions going on. And it really just struck me as very interesting. In fact, I had to play it back a couple of times to kind of listen to it. So there were two things I thought that were really good about talking about champions. And in doing a little more research, found out that when you talk about champions, it really comes from about 1,000 years ago or so, back when knights ruled the realm, along with kings and lords and other folks. And that knights were thought of as champions, but champions in two areas. One was they were obviously champions in their skills, right? They were expected to be able to go out against another knight and survive and conquer them. But secondly, they had a responsibility to be somebody who was concerned about other people. So there was a cause. There was something they would champion. So we're going to talk about both of those things. Let's come back to Aunt Lois. I was thinking about this from the last perspective first, which is championing of a cause. And we had a telephone call a few weeks ago here with some of the folks in AFCEC. And you know, when I look back at my life, when I look back at my professional career, you don't get to where you're going by yourself. And you didn't get to where you are by yourself either. I look back at my Aunt Lois, who's 91, soon to be 92. And in fact, when we were up there on, I'm pointing at my wife and kids because they all heard her, when we were up there on Monday night, right? We were Monday night, stopped in Wichita to see her for a few minutes because she's at that point where traveling is not so convenient for her anymore. She, as we were leaving after a couple hours of talking to her, she said, "You know, I will always be in your corner." Now, I lost my mom when I was 6. And Aunt Lois and Uncle Norval were that aunt and uncle in our family that reached out to me. They lived in Oklahoma. We moved back to Kansas, so they weren't like next to us all the time. And we didn't have cell phones and we didn't text because this was in the 60s. But every time we saw Norval and Lois was there. I always knew, no matter what, Aunt Lois is in my corner. She told me that 2 days ago. "Randy, no matter what you do, I'm always in your corner." And when I think about champions, I think about Aunt Lois. That no matter where it was, from the time I was 6 years old all the way through those awkward teenage years and all that, she was always there, and I knew Aunt Lois was always in my corner. She was my champion. She was there. And it made that transition from 6-year-old awkwardness and all the transitions we had to go through with the events that were ongoing through high school so much easier to know I had somebody in my life that was championing me. And I can look back, there was a lieutenant colonel when I first came to Wright Pat in 1984 that said, "Randy," and he doesn't know what he's talking about. But those things stick with you. People who speak to you in your career, speak to you in life, that speak hope to you, that speak a future to you, stick out in you, and they become important to you, even if you're not around them all the time. So you can think of champions. I'm sure every single one of you has had a champion. So the question then kind of turn away is, what are we doing to champion others? And I think in AFCEC and in organizations that we work with, we have to also not only think about who's our champion, but who are we championing? And so part of what we'll talk about as we have discussions going forward is how are we championing people? And I think it's a little different than mentoring. We tend to mentor a lot of folks. Here's what your next career move should be. Are you taking the right schools? Are you doing the right things at the right time? Are you hitting the right gates? All those sort of right things. But I see this as a much more, let's talk about how things are going in your life. Let's talk about how we can help you think through and work through issues. And I think back in every organization you have to have somebody who will champion somebody. And who will champion, not just one person, but multiple people. So we will talk about how we're champions of people. And what we're doing to help champion people, and how we're doing to help folks work through hard times, and how we're helping them work through transition and work through change. The other part is mastery, which I thought was an interesting part of this. How do we master it? And I thought about it from you can think about it from a sports perspective. As you get to know me, I'm a big St. Louis Cardinals fan. I think I'm safe. I can attest to that out. I don't think there's any. Although the little thing with the Houston Astros here a couple weeks ago, I'm not really sure what was up with that. But it's kind of like Richard Nixon. You don't really need to go bug, the opposing team because they're going to lose anyway. So why bother with the Astros? Sorry to all the Astros fans. But I think about it, and one of the most successful franchises in baseball history, they don't win the World Series every year, but they are champions. They're champions. They know how to repeat, and they know how to be winners year after year after year. They don't go up and down and up and down. They're there all the time. I think here you have a little basketball team called the Spurs, who knows how to be champions. So we're looking forward to getting to know Spurs and things. Our grandson has his LeBron James shoes on, so don't get But champions figure out how to make it work. And one of the things coming from the last few jobs is in sitting in some of the meetings we get to sit in from a ACS perspective, Agile Combat Support perspective, things we'll be doing here in just another month or two is how do we put the budget together? And we know that when you do that, you're talking about we don't have enough resources to go around. And that's not just dollars, that's people. We can't pay for enough people to do everything that needs to be done. We can't pay for all of the projects we need to do. In many cases, if you read what our leaders say, we don't have enough time to do everything we need to do. We need to be off recapitalizing things, whether it's our bases, whether it's our weapon systems, whatever it may be. We have to get on with replacing what's currently there with something that's newer because we're wearing things out and we need to get on with it. So how do we maintain our mastery at a time where resources are declining? And quite frankly, if you look to the future, you can't really hope that you're going to get a lot more resources. You're going to get more people, you're going to get more dollars, and then this is going to get more time. We were talking about this at an organization the other day, and I said, Jim, one of the things that was interesting was we had an opportunity for one of the professional speakers from Walt Disney's organization come talk to us about 3 or 4 years ago. And he related kind of the story of Walt Disney. I won't relate it today. It's an interesting story if you haven't heard it. But he said, sometimes we use the term thinking outside the box, which has a place. I don't want to offend anybody if you say that. But he says, sometimes you've got to think inside the box. You've got to look and say, what resources do I have available to me, and how do I make it work with what I have available? And you've got to answer that question first. And then you can begin to go outside the box and say, well, I can bring more resources in, then what difference can I make there? And so that's another conversation we will have. So I just expect when we have conversations about things, including one that I got called into today, is first thing is how do we make it work with the resources we have? How do we reshape the discussion to work with what we have available to us? And then we go forward to leadership and say, here's what we can do with what we have available to us. Here's what we could do if we had more available to us. So really looking forward to working with you. This, Joint Carter mentioned that she's glad to have me, and I'm glad to be here. So that's what I can say. Let me just call it a pause or finish up with this. Some of us are there. We're kind of at that point where we know we have a lot of years in front of us, but we probably only have 1 or 2 more jobs in front of us with the Air Force. So getting this opportunity, you don't know how excited I was to be able to have this opportunity. To come back to an organization like AFCEC. Something that was never, ever, ever on my, when the Air Force says, here's what you might be able to do in the future. This was never one of those things that they ever said, we'll let you do in the future. So when they came and said, hey, what do you think about coming to San Antonio? And what would you think about working AFCEC and IMSC? It was like, sign me up. Where do we go? How fast do you want it done? The fast didn't happen quite as fast as we thought. Seems like we've been talking about this forever, but we are excited. My wife's excited to be here. Grandson's excited to be here. He didn't want to go home. And we'll see where our son comes. Still in Joint Carter. He's getting ready to finish up his degree, so we need to determine is he going to finish it up in Texas or finish it up in Ohio. And that's a discussion we'll have to have here in the future. But I just want to wrap it up with a few thoughts. When we talk about championing, I wanted to know we're talking about how we have diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of people, and how we are inclusive of folks, and how we appreciate the differences there are. And I think especially in the world we are today, we have to be very mindful that we're being inclusive. I used to put up, when I was at England, I put up the leadership team. And you can imagine what the leadership team looked like. It was pretty much white males. That's who was my colonels and GS-15s that worked for me. So the challenge is, how do we change the faces you see on this leadership team? How can we in 2 years have a different group of folks? Or not that there's anything wrong with these, but if we don't take diversity seriously and inclusiveness seriously, then we just perpetuate what we have. And so we have to be intentional about being inclusive and be intentional about being diverse in the way we think, in the way we hire, in the way we look at who we put into what position. So again, these are the kinds of themes we'll have discussions on, and I look forward to that with you, and I look forward to the opportunity, Pam, sirs, and I know with our family support, it'll be a great time here. And I'll just close with this. I am pretty much an approachable kind of guy. So if you have anything you need to talk about, let's chat. Because what we need to do is figure out how we're going to make things work, how we're going to retain our mastery for AFCEC and help IMSC, because this is a team sport. We have to be able to take this new organization the Air Force has put a tremendous amount of responsibility into. It basically said, start running before you even have formed yourself into an organization, right? He's like, get on with it. And so we're part of that team now. So we're going to help make sure IMC is successful. We're going to make sure AFCEC is successful. And we're going to continue to be the best organization in the Air Force. And we're going to do that in spite of the change that's coming upon us, that we know is continuing to happen, in spite of the uncertainty that we have in front of us with budgets and other things. We're going to sail through this in a way that says we're the best, we know we're the best, and we're going to continue to be the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join Major General Carter and Mr. Brown in singing the first verse of the Air Force song, and remain standing for the departure of the official party.